You're listening to the She Lift Project podcast, a show dedicated to helping women achieve higher levels of success in the workplace. No matter where you are in your career, we want to help you grow. Now here's your host, Cynthia Kirkpatrick, a CPA, CFP, and Senior Financial Advisor at Moneta Group.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. I'm Cynthia Kirkpatrick and I'm happy to have you with us today. We have Dr. JoAnn Galakatos, MD, joining us to share her experience, path, story, and hopefully share some information tips for everybody out there. So thanks for joining.
You're welcome.
But before we jump into the details of what you're doing and where you're at today or why you're even here, anesthesiologist at Mercy Hospital, so local major hospital system. Mm-hmm. I loved where you put on here is other accomplishments you're proud of. Mother of 6 kids and 1.8 grandchildren.
Yes.
So one on the way.
Yes,
it
exactly.
Sounds
Due in
like
a month.
In a month. And then what we'll also get into, I had no idea, you and I have known each other for a while, but that you had an electrical engineering degree.
Correct, yes.
And actually started there. So, so currently at Mercy, anesthesiologist. I liked some of the, it says, what professional role do you play? And some of the terms that you used here kind of made me laugh. You are the gas passer or drug lady and every pregnant lady's best friend when in labor.
Exactly.
So is that really how you would describe your current role?
Oh, that was being funny. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's nobody remembers really us, which is fine. So we're just the people that pass the drugs and make their life a whole lot better when they're having surgery.
So I'm sure not only the patients, right, but then the doctors doing the surgery, you make their life obviously go well, their job go well.
Right.
Because
absolutely.
you're monitoring the patient throughout
and
the whole procedure.
We can make or break their case. We could cancel their case if the patient isn't healthy enough or we find something, wrong with their heart or lungs that we don't think it's safe for surgery. Or, we can make their wake up slow if we're not happy with them, or we can make their turnover long. So we have a big role in their life, in
like
the surgeon's life.
The surgeon and the patient, they barely remember you. I mean, I had 3 kids, 3 C-sections, and another surgery thrown in there. And you're right, the anesthesiologist is talking to you. You're falling asleep. Later, when you wake up, you think, I hope I didn't say anything.
Yeah, people ask me that all the time. Did I say anything incriminating? I'm like, nope. Even if they did, I'll never tell them.
Good. So why being an anesthesiologist of all, I guess, professions or options in the doctor world?
Well, I came from an engineering background, so I was very used to the black and white, just very mathematical. I was in medical school and I knew I wanted a family. And so I knew I wanted something that would work well with a family. I loved pediatrics and I loved OBGYN. But in those days, there was no part-time female physicians. I mean, it just wasn't heard of. So I just knew that I couldn't really work that with a family. And anesthesia lent itself well with my engineering background. I mean, it was very mathematical. It was very black and white.
So before you went, explain the engineering and then medical school.
Yeah.
Was that the plan all along?
Oh gosh, no. So my dad has his PhD in electrical engineering and I'm one of 7 kids. And if any of us 7 could do math and science, we were like, hey, you should go be an engineer. And, I don't know about your college search, but it was nothing like it is today. I was like, sure, Dad, sounds good. And I got a full ride to a University of Missouri school because I was top of my class in high school. So my parents were basically like, well, which one do you want to go to? That was my college search. My dad goes, you should go down to Raleigh because you should be an engineer. You can do math science. So literally, I started engineering, and I liked it. I liked what I read about it and the little I knew. There was no STEM classes. I took calculus and physics and all that in high school, but, there was no, here's what an engineer does kind of thing. So I went down to Raleigh, and by the probably the middle of my sophomore year. I remember calling my dad and I go, Dad, like, what does an engineer even do? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. Like, what does an electrical engineer do? Now, mind you, I was getting a 4.0. I was doing great, but I didn't know what my career like path was. So I found 3 summer internships, one after my freshman year. I worked at General Motors plant in Wentzville. Mind you, at that time, there was nothing in Wentzville. There was the General Motors plant, and there was a pizza place, and there was a gas station, and nothing else. So I did a summer job there, and then the following summer, I went back there, and then I was like, I don't really like this kind of, it was plant engineering. So I got to, help with all the electrical systems to, that helped the machinery to put the cars together, basically. And it was cool, but I said, I really need to get like a more of a hardcore research type of job and see if that's the part of engineering I like. So I did that the summer before my senior year of college, and I was at McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, and I was working on the black box for the F-18, and I remember coming home one August. Cynthia, I still remember the song playing on the radio, and I remember just driving down. It was a beautiful evening, and I had just left work, and I'm like, I hate this. Like, I really hate this. I don't like being an engineer. And I came home, and I said, Dad, I think I want to go into medical school. And he's like, you don't want to do that. And I go, no, I really don't like engineering. And so being the daughter of an engineer, we spent 2 weeks sitting every night analyzing my thought processes. There was no room for emotion. There was no room for anything but logical, explanation. So after 2 weeks, he said, okay, I think this is something that you really thought out, and you should go to WashU. And I'm like, So anyway, long story short, I think I always wanted to go to medical school. I always loved the study of medicine, but as a young female, nobody was encouraging anyone to go to medical school, and I was afraid of the time commitment, and I was afraid of not being able to have a family. And then when I got into the engineering world, I realized I can't work part-time as an engineer. There's project deadlines and stuff. No one's going to let me say, yeah, you have Friday off, even though this big project is due tomorrow. So anyway, I realized that if I wanted to work part-time, maybe going into medicine would actually be a better idea. So that was August before my senior year of college, and I took my MCATs in September. I had 3 weeks of biology, I had 3 weeks of chemistry, and I doubled up. I took chemistry 1 at the same time as organic. I took biology at the same time as anatomy and physiology because I had a boat ton. I had 1 chemistry class as far as my prerequisites. So anyway, I did all of my prerequisites, finished my engineering degree, and got into WashU. And so I started a year later. I started medical school a year from that August. So
what do you think
crazy.
Was it about engineering that wasn't clicking? Was it just the part-time and the family, or were there other things underneath where it was like, I don't see myself being happy with this?
I wanted more of a people interactive role, and engineering was definitely not that. I needed to be with people. I needed to talk with people. I guess if there were women, maybe so, but at that time there weren't that many women in medicine either, so it wasn't really a female thing. But for me, I just needed, and I really loved medicine, and I finally just accepted the fact that I could do it, but I was too afraid to admit that I was, not that I couldn't do it, but I was too afraid of the time commitment and being able to have a family. And then I think 4 years later, I realized, I can make this work. So.
And the time commitment, thinking of the medical school
the
and then
years
the residency and all that.
Right.
Which for those, I know a little bit, but what is that time commitment for those that are listening?
It's 4 years of undergraduate degree, and then 4 years of medical school, and then anywhere between 3 to, for me, it was 4 more years of anesthesia training, but it could be 3 years if you do pediatrics, or it could be 8 years if you do neurosurgery. So 4 undergrad, 4 med school, and then your training, which is variable depending on the field you choose. So for me, it was 4 additional years. So it was 12 years after high school.
So you loved medical, you loved the medical field,
Right.
but the time commitment potentially conflicting with, I know I want a family.
Right.
And I think you mentioned earlier, the environment, community not really encouraging or pushing, I wouldn't say pushing, but helping women into the medical field.
Oh, I remember specifically talking to friends of mine, a friend of mine who has 2 brothers in medical school, and they both told me don't do it. But if you talk to a lot of doctors, they'll tell you not to do it. It's a system where it's hard. It's a long, hard road, and then you get burnt out quickly. A lot of physicians do, but for me, and even my daughter, she's graduating from medical school next month or 2 months. Many physicians told me, why are you letting your child go into medicine, because of all the changes and blah, blah. And I go, you know what? She's not going into it to be her own boss. She's not going into it because she thinks she's going to make a lot of money. Because both of those are, definitely going, by the wayside. I was like, she's going into it because she really loves medicine. And that's really what you have to do. And that was me. I really loved the study of medicine. And being able to talk to patients, being able to help patients, to me, it was so much more rewarding than engineering.
So do you think of it any differently? I imagine when people are going through med school and just out of med school, maybe a few years, they feel one way. Being in the industry for so long, do you feel any different about telling somebody to go into it?
No, I mean, okay, so I still love my job, but I work part-time. And I think that if I had to work full-time, as any, career, you're going to have a little bit more frustration with it. So because I chose to work part-time, I think that when I am there, I still really love my job. I don't have to work, but I choose to work because I really just love my job. So... But, not everybody is as blessed to be able to work part-time. So,
and I imagine with 6 children, how could you do it any differently?
Well, yeah. That was just, it was crazy. You just have to have good help. And, my thing with my husband, he would always say, you don't have to work. And I told him 2 things. One, people listen to me and I get respect when I go to work. So it's kind of like a Mother's Day out. And 2, I was like, I love it when I get there. I love my job. So yeah, I've always stayed working. But, I know there's a lot of physicians who, the system has beat them down, but that's in any field or any career.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, again, let's think about how long it takes to become a doctor, plus family, plus being a female in the medical industry. What are some of the challenges that you faced along the way? Before we started recording, I was mentioning how about a year ago, you and I were sitting at a graduation barbecue, maybe it's almost 2 years now, I can't remember, and you were telling me about some of the challenges you faced early on entering this field. Even, I think maybe it was your residency and you were pregnant and people telling you, don't get pregnant, don't do this.
The comments that I received, they just would never fly today. Never. It went back to when I was interviewing for medical school. And I remember it was a WashU interviewer. And he said to me, how do you feel about not that many women being in medicine? It was a fair enough question, but nowadays you could never bring that up. And I just kind of laughed at him. I said, well, it's got to be better than electrical engineering because there's one other girl in my class. And then, we got pregnant the first year after I started my training. And I had a physician look at me in the eye and he said, you realize all you did was take a male spot in medical school? And I remember going, yeah, well, that requires no response. And I just walked away. And later on, he was an old-time surgeon. We were scrubbed in a case. And I looked at him and I said, I guarantee you I graduated higher than any of those surgical residents in medical school, And I did, but because I had chosen a family, he thought I was going to quit. And, so that, and I mean, I remember literally having every year we sat down with our anesthesia department chairman to talk about career options and all that stuff. And I think I may have been pregnant with my second at that point. And he looked at me and he goes, you could really make something of yourself. Like you have so much potential. You could really do something. And he goes, but I know you have outside interests when you go home. Like, should we call them by their name, or are we just going to leave it like that, So basically he was implying because I was choosing to be a mother and I had outside interests, I wasn't going to climb the big, academic career ladder. And, to this day, well, he's retired now, but I remember he used to always send me a Christmas card, from the department, and he'd sign it, some cheesy Christmas card. And I thought, dude, you can save your stamp because I am never coming back, to academic medicine. So, just comments like that through the years. Nowadays, those would never fly. The females could never, But I remember literally when I was nursing and I would be pumping in the bathroom, and I would pump at a bathroom sink, and people would be trying to wash their hands, and I'd be hearing my name overhead. It was just like there was no accommodations, zero. And now I walk back past the lactation room. I'm like, oh, wow, I would have been happy with my own closet, much less anything. So, all those things have changed dramatically, and great. That's awesome. Because then the women can go back to work, because the men say they were not going to go back to work. Well, make the accommodations for us, So
I think it's important what you said there. A lot has changed.
Oh my gosh.
For the better, which is great.
Absolutely.
Looking back, you mentioned just kind of letting those comments slide. Maybe that was the right thing to do back then in the era. Do you think, would you do anything differently looking back? Would you challenge that, or?
It's not my personality. I can yell at my husband and kids, but I can't really yell at not really yell, but, I'm not super confrontational. I'll make a little comment here and there. I remember after we had number 6, I wasn't sure if I was going to go back. It was just overwhelming at home. And they were like, what it'll take to get you to come back. Tell us what your schedule you want. And I said, okay, you want to hear it? I don't want to start cases till 8 in the morning, and I want to be off by 2. It's like, I want to get my kids off to school, and I want to be there when they get home. So they're like, we'll make it work. We'll have people cover for you, and so come back. So I did 2 days a week. That's all I was working, 2 days, 3/4 of a day kind of thing. And I remember leaving one day around 2, and one of my male counterparts, super nice guy, great guy, goes, must be nice, to be basically leaving at 2. And I said, yeah, going home to the harder job. And he goes, oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I'm like, oh, no, I know. Staying here is a lot easier than going home to the chaos that I've got waiting for me, So in my career, it was starting to, they definitely have made huge progress as far as letting women, be more accommodating with their schedule. And then we will stay working, because family life will be able, you can balance it better.
I imagine, though, it wasn't like you got your first job and said, okay, I want all these accommodations.
Oh.
You had to work hard, prove yourself.
Right.
Put the time in.
Oh, yeah. I was the first female physician anesthesiologist that Mercy hired. They really didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know how to pay me. They didn't know what to do with me because they had some part-time nurse anesthetists, but they never had a part-time physician. So I was woefully underpaid in the beginning, and I kind of suspected it. I knew it, but I just wanted to get my foot in the door. And then we used to always have a system of who gets out, who started their cases earlier, who's been, and I was always the last person out. I wasn't getting paid hourly, but, I was always, because I was part-time, she can stay and finish that case till 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whereas the other people were getting out, and they're like, well, they have to come back tomorrow. True, but they're getting paid to come back tomorrow, so I pay my dues. And then I remember specifically talk about, I mean, I have a bazillion of them, these comments that people make, and they're just, I don't think they ever meant to be rude to me. But when you hear it played back, you're like, did you really just say that? We finally had a very strong-willed anesthesiologist, female, and she wanted to go part-time because she had kids, and she spoke her piece. She spoke her mind. So I was just like, yeah, what she said, yeah, because I could never. Yeah. So she was trying to fight for better salary for us because they really didn't know how to compensate because we weren't on a partnership track. So we were never going to get the partnership.
Well, why was that? Why were you never going to get partnership?
Because we were part-time.
Okay.
Yeah, because we were part-time. So she was a previous partner, and then she cut back. So she had a lot more know-how of how the salary and the bonus and all that worked. And I was like, happy to take a paycheck home, happy to do my job. I never really needed that much money with my husband being a physician. So for me, it was more like I just wanted to keep my career up. So in that sense, I've been very blessed. But we were having this conversation with one of the partners about our compensation. And so she was very knowledgeable about everything that went down behind closed doors where I had never been a partner. So he said, do you realize that my wife works more hours than you guys up at our kids' school, volunteering, and she doesn't get paid anything? And I was like, yeah, well, I just put a 2-kilogram baby to sleep today. That's not serving lunch. That's not volunteering for a Halloween party or a Christmas party. We're not volunteering. We're doing hardcore anesthesia. We're just doing it, fewer days. So comparing us working part-time to his wife working volunteering up at school, I was like, you just didn't even see the connection there.
It is pretty amazing, some of the comments, even still, that are made today, that I think is one reason why this podcast exists, is to tell stories and to talk about it and make people aware, not necessarily because it's mean-spirited.
Exactly.
But
most of them, a couple early on, like the old-time surgeon, but those were rare. More of it was just kind of ignorance, It's getting a ton better because there's so many young female physicians coming out. I mean, when I would be talking to a patient, years ago, and, a family member would, call into the room and they'd be like, yeah, well, so the nurse is here now. So I can't talk. And I would just, okay, whatever. I mean, I'd always introduce myself as Dr. Galakatos, but whatever. They just didn't assume that, they just assumed that if I was a female, I wasn't going to be a doctor. But now there's so many female physicians out. I mean, I don't get that ever anymore. Well, maybe because I have more gray hair, but.
What do you think is the change for more female physicians?
I think the STEM classes for sure, and then just the encouragement of females can do this, and I think the flexibility of the work schedule. Like, we have a GI doctor now who, generally if I'm in the colonoscopy suite, we don't stop. Like, we don't stop for lunch. We don't stop. The nurses all get breaks, but the GI doc and the anesthesia doc, we just keep on going. So we'll generally finish 2-ish, 3-ish, sometimes 1, but generally at 2 o'clock. And so, you're pretty hungry by that point, and you've just been doing case after case after case. Well, she rearranged her schedule so that she can pump in the middle of the day every time she has a baby. I'm like, that's so freaking awesome that everybody's like, yeah, we have to take a break because Dr. Gore needs to go pump. And I'm like, wow, just completely unheard of. So we're making accommodations. And so females can see, hey, I can have a family and keep up my career. So.
And probably even for her, and I wrote it down, something that you said earlier, is speaking up and saying, no, I want this. No, I need it. Mm-hmm. For you mentioned that other female who was part-time saying, because she had already known, and you're saying, yes, what she said.
Yeah, exactly.
So some of it's knowledge and gaining knowledge around the whole situation. But I think a part of it, and I know I have my own issues with this, is asking for what we need and setting those boundaries. And that seems to be helping, because even though the accommodations are there, she could say, I'm going to power through no matter what, because that's just what we always do.
Right.
Instead, she says, hold up, I'm going to pause, do what I need to do, and then we'll continue from there.
Absolutely. Right. And I think more females, there's power in numbers, and there's a lot more of these young females, and they're talking together. And so, like I said, when I first got out, I mean, I was the first part-time physician anesthesiologist that they hired. I didn't have anyone to like talk to, commiserate with, or, how's this working for you? And are you always getting stuck to in the last cases of the day? Because I'm always stuck late. And, but now they're all, there's so many more. So in fact, my daughter's going into OBGYN, and that field has dramatically changed. I mean, now there's no men going into it. I mean, if any, there's one in any class. So, and Erin, my daughter, is, she was worried about how's this going to work. She's in a pretty high, powered field or whatever. And I said, sweetheart, I was like, your partners are going to be females. They're going to get it. Most of them will probably have families, not all, but most. And I'm like, you guys will all be able to say, hey, something came up, last minute, like, can you cover for me? And so I said, you will have so much more understanding with all females than men who, and my husband's one of them. Oh my, I mean, he never, there was no accommodations on his part.
For you. So that was going to be another question at some point through this conversation is, well, I think a couple of things. One, I was talking to somebody a couple months ago. They said they look at doctors and think, oh, you have everything. There's no issues, no challenges. Whether or not one is just a doctor and the other spouse stays home, there's still challenges and things to deal with. So I imagine both of you being doctors, and you have patients that you're seeing, and you have a schedule, and if something comes up, whether it's kids or you're sick or a house issue, the air conditioner goes out and somebody's going to come over, and you have all these other people relying on you, not only the patients but all the other staff and the different things that you're doing.
Right. There was no, you had to have somebody at home. Like, I always had my babysitter at home, and she was my wife. When I was gone, she took care of everything. Now, the night before, me writing down who needed lunch and who, had to stay after school and who needed to study for a test and who had practice and, all that kind of stuff. I had like this long list every night before I worked. And then, funny enough, Greg would just I'd be going through the list the morning that I was leaving, standing there talking to my babysitter, Mary. She was phenomenal. And Greg would come in the kitchen, grab his coffee, and like, have a good day. I'm like, sign me up for that shit. I mean, seriously, just walk through the kitchen and be like, bye. I'm like, I took care of it all. I took care of it all. So that was how we worked it. It's fine. He's a great guy, but he would if I let him, but he'd probably forget kids' places and wouldn't think it was important that they study early. All those things that moms generally are more focused on. So anyway,
I have no idea what you mean on that front. And I agree with you. I know you guys have been married for a long time. I'm coming up on 20 years with my husband. Amazing, so supportive, great relationship, does a lot, also doesn't see a lot. And I think that's just the female nature where...
And when you raise a boy, you see it. You're like, oh, that's just ingrained in you. They just don't see it. And Greg would do anything I ask him to, but he just doesn't see it. Right.
And they might forget some of those things along the way of they will do anything, but you're right, they don't see it. And it's almost on you then to make sure that you ask somebody or that you get it done or you remind. Right. And if you're not the nag, then
right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, right. Yeah.
But I guess the important part of this, I feel like you said, some of it's me not
delegating.
Right. Or just putting my hands up and saying, you know what, I'm no longer responsible for this. Cole, you're 16. You get the messages just like we do, that if you have a late start or you're off or you have to, actually, we'll see if this happens this week. He's supposed to bring something to school on Thursday they donate things. I didn't saw it yesterday. I thought, I'm just going to let it go. It's not my responsibility. It's his school. So what part of that is, as women, as moms, we need to either ask, we need to delegate, we need to get out of the way and let potentially that 16-year-old fail and not bring that in that day. And what is it society and what is it men? I don't know.
I think men in general are a ton better than certainly my dad, and then his parents, So I think we're moving in the right direction. I mean, if you ever pay attention to commercials about laundry, it's all men doing laundry. Have you ever noticed that?
I haven't lately.
Look at the laundry commercials. It's men doing so I think they're trying to send a message, hey, men can do this. Men can do all that. My husband's mentality was hard because he's such an intense surgeon mentality. And if I cried out for help, like, I need more help, and he would be like, hire people to help you. I'm too busy with my work. I can't help. And I would always say, I didn't have these children for somebody else to raise. I'm like, you know what? I need you home. I need your help. And it's worked out for us. I mean, in the sense that he has come home a lot more than I think he would have. But in general, no, he hasn't pulled his fair share. But, then I don't work full time. So that's the balance. And it works for us. But, there's a lot of men, that are staying home now. And I think it's a very respectful position to be in. And so I think society's moving that direction, but yeah, it's probably slow.
Yeah, I think the more people see it out there, commercials or men who are staying home. I know my husband saw his family where his mom would work. It's at one point in their lives growing up in the evening. His dad worked during the day, so his dad would make dinner. Now, it might be like a Tombstone pizza or something, but still, his dad was making
right.
And inside family joke, no mushrooms, but don't like mushrooms. So I think he partially saw that growing up, and so was able to adapt as we evolved as a couple and a family. And so being able to see that not only from the male side, but the female side. So I'm sure more women going into the medical field, they're seeing women like you who've done it, who've persevered, other women that you partnered with in that office to say, well, I'm now part-time. This is what we need to be able to do it. Or the GI doctor saying, right. I'm going to pause middle of the day. So probably both sides seeing, oh, we can do it that way.
Right. Well, and I mean, at least in the medical field, I'm like, patients really like female doctors. They listen more. They're more compassionate. That's a generalization, clearly. But I think having more females in medicine has brought what, in years past, where there was the family doctor that knew everybody, and there was the, everybody could rely on that person. They knew their family or whatever. Those days are long gone, right? And bringing more females into it is bringing a little bit more of the compassion back, because they generally just tend to listen. We have one young female doctor. I absolutely love her. She pulls up a chair. She pulls up a chair by everybody's bedside, and she goes, let's chat. Let's just chat, And I'm like, it's just a different approach, which men generally aren't that way. So I think it's just moving in the right direction as far as women seeing that they can do the medicine and men seeing they can do the home thing, and we can, combine it better. So
do you think your kids have been impacted one way or the other by seeing you part-time, but getting help, but you also persevering in this industry that is career that's challenging?
Yes. Part of the reason why I never wanted to quit is because I wanted to show my girls that you can have a career. You can have a career and still have a family. My son does all the cooking for his wife when he comes home, for the most part. Sorry, Libby, if you do more. But he says he does. I've seen him do a lot more female roles than his father ever did, and I know my daughter who's going into medical school, she, realizes now that she can have a family and go be in medicine. So I have another daughter who's thinking about dental school. And I'm like, what a great field for, a female. So, yeah, I think that it's been important for me. And I've also told my girls the one thing that I was glad I never did was I never, ever quit. Like I never even, I had maternity leaves, but I never left the field for any length of time because I think it's harder to get back in. It's hard to get back in and it's harder to feel confident going back in. So I've encouraged them all to find a job that they can have a good work-life balance, so that they don't ever really leave it and therefore they always have something, to fall back on.
And I think you had your first child, second child early on in your career, but even for women who are out of college working, work hard, work smart, be there, be reliable, so that at some point in time, if you need to ask for something, they're more likely to give it to you.
Right. And they know the value that you'll bring when you come back, or if you take some time off or whatnot. Right.
I don't remember the whole story, but I think you told a story about you were really sick and you were barely climbing up the stairs into the hospital. So when you say don't quit, literally,
yeah.
I don't, again, maybe you can tell us that story to say, you're going to go through some hard things. You can do it. Don't quit. That story.
Call me stupid moment. I have a disease called ulcerative colitis and I got crazy sick about 5-6 years ago. And, I was in a smaller group at the time and I had to go to work. I had to go to work. It was like I was the only anesthesiologist there. And there was probably 60 patients coming in. It was an eye center at the time. And I remember just literally trying to get to the top of the steps and just being exhausted from climbing up one flight of steps. And I remember clinging to the handle and I walked in and the nurse goes, "Tell me you're not here to work." And I go, "I'm all you got today. I'm the only anesthesiologist here today." And it was, I went through some hard times. I'm feeling a lot better now. And I did take some time off when I was crazy sick after that because I kind of thought, I'm not doing anyone any favors here. So, but yeah, no, never quit.
What, if you could give yourself advice or your daughter's advice looking back, what would some of those, maybe we've already touched upon them or we can summarize them or there's new things. What advice would you give?
I think the biggest thing that would have made my life a lot easier then is somebody's got to have flexibility in the family. Not that you're going to choose your spouse based on their career, but it certainly would have been helpful for my career if my husband had any flexibility and for his too. Because when I went to work, I was completely, of course, he doesn't answer the phone to the home when he's at work. That's, his way of I didn't know what was going on kind of thing. So, that's kind of one of the things that would have been nice for me to keep more of my career up if I had some sort of flexibility with my husband. But, I found a great babysitter and she basically became what he couldn't help me with. So when I was going into medical school, physician assistant wasn't even a term. There was no PAs. And now all the young women are going into PA school. Not all, but a lot of these women say, I want to go to medical school or PA school. And, a lot of these women would make great doctors, but I think they convince themselves that it's a shorter road and an easier road and blah, blah, blah. But, medical school is 4 years undergrad and 4 years of medical school. But PA school is 4 years of undergrad and 3 years of PA school. Now, if you're a doctor, you do have to do the training. It's paid. You work a lot of hours. It is paid job. So anyway, I would just say that, you can still go for, I've never regretted going for the highest degree I could get. And you can always come back. So I'm always happy that I did that far. So I always tell these young women who come talk to me, I'm like, you can make it work. Like nowadays you can have a family, you can have flexibility, you can have a work-life balance being a doctor. You don't have to be, anything less if that's not what you choose to. If you want to be a PA, that's great. It's a fantastic field. But if you want to be a doctor, you can do it. Don't cut yourself short. Just,
don't let fear.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So do you think mentoring would help, whether it's in the medical field or any other field, for these younger women early on to catch somebody like you and say, not only have you gone through all this, but then you've had experience where you've seen the industry change. What advice would you have to me? So would that be helpful? 1, and 2, is that established? Is that available?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people to reach out to. I think it's just when the going gets tough, it's easy to kind of like, I don't have to do all that, I didn't have an option. There was no PA. There was no shorter route, So, but the one thing I did do is when I was in medical school and I was like, this is so hard. I can't do this. I knew I could get a job the next day. Like I could walk out and get a job as an engineer. So it was good that I had an option. So I got to choose whether I wanted to stay or not. But if you had like a undergrad with like a biology or chemistry, it's just going to be harder to get out and get, good solid jobs. So I think there's a lot of mentoring going on now. I see it in the kids' schools. They have the STEM, my daughter went to Koryezu, my oldest daughter, and there's this huge STEM project, and, there's female robotics teams and stuff. All that. So the mentoring, I think it's out there. You just have to reach out for it. These girls need to reach out for it.
Yeah, it sounds like if you're young, high school, college, don't be afraid to reach out to somebody. Maybe you don't even know, or it's somebody you do know. I saw you're connected to this person. Can you make an intro? Mm-hmm. And ask to have a phone call, a meeting, a coffee, or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And maybe help vet some of that struggle out earlier on.
Right. Absolutely.
Because I will say personally, when I took my CPA exam before marriage, before kids, it was a lot easier than some of the other exams I did pregnant or with a couple of kids. I'm sure you'd say the same thing.
Oh my gosh. I just had, I took my oral boards 3 weeks after I had a second trimester miscarriage. And it was my second trimester miscarriage in a row. So I had 2 back-to-back in between babies 2 and 3. And I had to sit for my oral boards like 3 weeks later. And I remember making chocolate chip cookie dough and eating it because I was so depressed. I was so depressed. I was so sad. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to have any more kids. And then I had to sit for the oral boards. And in anesthesia, when you sit for your oral boards, they basically just grill you on one complication after another to see if you're going to, save the patient, if you're going to figure out what's going on with the patient. And they tell you beforehand that a lot of your patients are going to die, and we're just going to keep on giving you complications or whatever. It's really hard to feel good about how well you did when all your patients die because you're like, I know they told me that, but I still didn't save anyway. Anyway, so a lot of chocolate chip cookie dough, and I passed, thankfully. And then we were able to go on and have 4 more kids. But yeah, I just remember sitting there for that. It put it in perspective, though. Taking the oral boards at that time, I was like, certainly my family is still the most important part of my life, which is the reason why I wrote that. I'm like, my biggest accomplishment is my 6 kids.
So tell me about, I'm imagining oral boards. You're walking into this room that's sterile, stale, not a lot going on, and you just have people behind, like 4 or 5 doctors in white coats and whatever, behind a table throwing all these things at you. Is that what it was like at all?
Not quite. It's actually in a hotel room, and we weren't doing the physical anesthesia. They were just telling me things that happened and would show me the vital signs and show me what was going on. And so basically for an hour in one room, and then a little break, and then an hour in another room. And there was 2 physicians that sat there and just threw out every complication they could come up with. and I had to figure out what to do. I mean, and they had the graphs and they had, all that stuff. So we weren't practicing on patients. But yeah, it was like I had a headache for 3 days afterwards. Just the stress of just being grilled, and trying to, and then knowing that I still didn't save them, because then they told us most of them are going to die. So just be prepared. But I still feel like I'm going to figure it out.
Maybe doing that in a hotel room is normal in the medical field. Why a hotel room?
Yeah, because everybody had to fly to Baltimore. I mean, I took my oral boards. Everybody had to fly in, and we were literally all lined up. And seriously, we were all lined up, and all the examiners were in the hotel rooms, and we were all lined up in chairs outside in the hallway. And then you got called in. Yeah, it was very strange. You wouldn't think that that's how you do, But I guess because you have to be in person, and they want to make sure you can think on your feet and act on your feet and stuff. And I guess nowadays I think they have better simulators. In those days we still had like, Annie, are you breathing? Annie, are you breathing? Nowadays they probably have, a ton of simulators. So probably much better. Maybe more stressful. I don't know.
Right. Maybe they can go harder at you because it's all there.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
You mentioned the joy of being an anesthesiologist. And while in those boards and getting those interviews, you didn't save a lot of people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
However, I imagine throughout your career, there's a few stories that really stick out that said, I am where I'm supposed to be. Can you share your most interesting, exciting, proud moment or two?
I remember when I was relatively new, probably had been there less than 6 months at Mercy, and there was a call into the anesthesia lounge that they needed anesthesia stat up to the ICU. And they had sedated a patient to do a procedure on her, and they had lost her airway, and she was struggling to breathe. And so I remember 2 of my more senior male colleagues and I ran up because we were done with our cases. And, your classic 10 people around the bedside. And the first male colleague looked into her airway to see if he could put an endotracheal tube in to secure her breathing. He couldn't see anything. The second colleague looked, and the patient was struggling to breathe. She was sedated, heavily sedated, and she was just kind of gasping to breathe. And the general surgeon was standing there getting ready to put a knife in her throat to put a emergency airway in. And I remember looking at the nurse, and I said, "Get me some nasal spray." And she's like, "What for?" I'm like, just give me some nasal spray. And she brought it to me. I said, "Hold on 1 second." And I put the tube through her nose. The nasal spray was to decrease the blood vessels in the nose. And I put the tube to the nose, and the patient was truly struggling to breathe. And I just advanced it a little bit, and she just sucked it in, and I, secured the airway without them having to go through the neck and whatnot. And I remember everybody just kind of looking around. They're like, what, you just did? And I'm like, you know what? Barnes in the middle of the night, you're training, you're like the only one there. I'm like, the nasal airway saved you so many times when you couldn't really see what you were looking for, because when you intubate a patient, you look for the vocal cords, and you're trying to put the tube through the vocal cords because it leads to the lungs. But a lot of times, if they're obese and they have a lot of tissue and you can't see where you're going, and nowadays we have a lot of fiber optic instruments, but back in those days, it's pretty limited. So I was like, guys, when you're alone at 3 a.m. and you're losing the airway, you go for the nose, and you just, and so that was my, everybody was like, dang, that was impressive. I was like, okay, I'll take it once, and that was it. And I mean, the surgeon was just standing there getting ready to cut her neck, just to secure her air that way. And I remember thinking, all right, I think they think I'm okay. Like, I'm decent. Like, I literally saved that patient's airway. So I do remember feeling really good about it, thinking, okay, I can hang with these guys. It was relatively new, but I can do what I was trained to do. So
probably those dark, troubling moments at 3 a.m. at the ER, looking back, it's going through those.
Oh, absolutely saved me. That's how you learn. You're on your own. You're the only anesthesiologist. I mean, when we were at Barnes, you carried the call beeper, and if anybody coded, you as the anesthesiologist showed up to the code to secure the airway. So you were at, every code in the middle of the night, so lots of codes, lots of experience. So, I mean, I benefited from training at an excellent institution where I got lots of practice.
Yeah, so lots of practice, probably very challenging. But had you not gone through that patient would have a cut.
Well, they would have had a surgical airway, which would have eventually healed, but I got to look like the star for one shining moment.
I just imagine you walking out with a little swagger.
And you know what? It was one of those things that I actually did feel good about myself, And in anesthesia, you're never the surgeon. Nobody remembers you, which is fine. I don't need that. I remember somebody said to me, "Do you ever feel like you're the second doctor in the room? Because you're not the surgeon." And I was like, I don't care if I'm the 22nd doctor in the room. I said, at night tonight, if there's any problems with his patients, they're calling the surgeon, not me. So it was good. And, I did pediatrics a lot when I came out. And I loved doing the kids. Loved doing the kids. And I would say to the moms, I get it. I mean, I get this. I know how hard this is for you. And I had a lot of moms come back to me saying, you made such a difference for me because I was so nervous. But knowing you as a mom took over versus, just somebody that didn't quite have a compassionate feel. So that was always very special, hearing back from the moms. So
yeah, trust yourself. Go through the difficult times and know that there might be a bright point down the road that had you not had that difficult time, you wouldn't be able to add that extra layer of empathy,
prepared for you,
connection, protection.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Being a mom, doing kids, that helped me tremendously.
And in so many fields where being a mom can be looked upon as a negative.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Again, we just need to shift our thought and say, actually, being a mom, being that family's CEO of probably having to manage so much and dealing with different kids, with different personalities, with different challenges, with different activities, actually, maybe being a mom is a benefit in the workplace.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the nurses used to always know that if they worked with any other anesthesiologist, they got to carry the patient back to the room if it was a baby or a toddler or whatever. But they're like, no, I'm working with Dr. G. She carries the patient back. I took the patient. I took the patient from the mom. I'm like, I got this. I'm going to take the best care of, little, Freddie. And I will not leave his side. And so the nurses all knew that they didn't get to carry the baby. I was going to.
But those seems like a little touch makes a world of difference for the person going.
And I knew that it did because, patients and mothers had come back to tell me. And being a mom, I know that would have, and John did have hernia surgery when he was a baby. So I remember just watching him go, and your heart just is like, oh, breaking because if being on the other side, all the things that can go wrong, right? So just knowing that he was in good hands was, made me feel wonderful. So I like to be able to provide that for the moms. So,
and I'm sure they appreciate it on their side.
They did. So that was a good feeling.
So you talked about your biggest accomplishment being your kids. But you also talked about you're so glad you never quit and, you still challenged yourself mentally and in a hard field. So looking back, would you change anything?
No, I'm really glad that I have that engineering background. I thought it was much easier to get into medical school with an engineering background.
Why is that?
I think they realize that you know how to problem solve, and they realize you know how to, do some hardcore, studies. Took me a little bit to figure out how to memorize well, coming from an engineering background, but that just took some time. But so I always tell kids, if you don't know for sure that you want to go to medical school, get an engineering degree. It's hard, and you'll get a great job afterwards. And then, I had a physician who sat on the admission boards at SLU say to me, we take all the applicants to medical school and we separate out the engineers and we look at everybody else the same. He's like, because the engineers are going to probably have a lower GPA, but they're going to have a lot harder classes, and we know that so we're just going to look at them a little different. And I experienced that because I took my MCATs with 3 weeks of biology and 3 weeks of chemistry. So my score was terrible. My score in physics was very good. And they just kind of understood my story. They understood that I hadn't taken them, and I still got into WashU. So anyway, I'm glad I did engineering undergrad. And, I love the field of anesthesia. I don't think I would change anything different. WashU was a great experience. And, once again, I speak from a very blessed position that I've been able to work part-time. And so, I still love my job every day. I think I probably would if I had to work full-time, but no, and I certainly wouldn't change, all my kids. I would probably change the fact that I probably shouldn't have had the first one as early as I did, but, we literally graduated from medical school in May, started our internship, which is your first year of training, in July, and I found out I was pregnant like July 15th, like the very first month of my training. So that was hard. Physically, I would barely make it out of patient's room because I had to go throw up. I would be on call 24 hours and I wouldn't be sleeping at all, and I could barely stand because I was throwing up all night long. My sister came up to the hospital one day because I was too weak to drive home. So being pregnant, doing that intense training was hard, and Greg was never home. So as soon as Matt was born, it was all me. He was the first kid at daycare every morning, the last kid to leave, so those were very hard years. And then when I was pregnant with Kelly, I was still a resident. And I was working 80 plus hours a week. Greg was working 100 hours a week. We had this toddler. I was pregnant. I was exhausted. So I remember driving along Hampton Road because we lived in South City, and it was 6 a.m, and I remember a truck crossing the center lane, and he started coming right at me. And I remember saying, just hit me. I was like, I don't want to die, God. I just want to go to the hospital and sleep. I was so tired. I was so tired. But, you forget those days.
You have more kids and you forget all about it.
Yeah, but I wasn't working the hours. To have 2 kids during training was kind of crazy.
What got you through all of that? You mentioned at some point you had a sitter and you had help.
Yeah, at the time we didn't have any money.
Yeah.
My mom and Greg's mom helped for a little while when Matt was first born until I finished my residency. And then, he was in daycare. He was in daycare from the time it opened to the time it left, and I felt so guilty about that. But he's probably my most well-adjusted kid. He's so darn independent. My youngest, who I spent the most time with, he's probably got the he's most anxious. I'm like, dude, you could do this. So what got me through that, faith that it was going to get better. It was time limited. I'm a countdowner. I knew I had 4 years. I knew I had 3 years. I knew I had 2 years, so, and I wasn't going to quit. I loved it. I loved what I was doing. Family, faith, and a lot of good babysitters.
So it sounds like you loved what you were doing. So at the core, you found something that fit with what made you tick. So helping others, black and white, being able to be part-time and family at some point But our conversation, it sounds like you're one who wanted to excel, get great grades, make an impact at that very challenging level. And so all of those aligned with you and your values in this, which had you stayed with engineering, maybe it may not be that, okay, I only have one more year to get through this 2 years. You might be thinking, oh, this is awful all the way through. So finding that industry that connects with your core.
I've always loved what I do when I go in. I love talking to patients. I love helping patients. I love reassuring them. I love when they wake up happy. You know, I've had some patients that I've lost through no fault of my own, but you know, you carry those with you. But I love what I do. So that's been very helpful. And my husband loves his job. He loves his job. He can get called at 3 a.m. to go in and fix a fracture, and he will not complain. I'd be like kicking and 3 a.m. But he loves his job too. So that's been helpful. And our kids have seen that. I mean, we talk medicine at the table, and they are just, we don't realize we do that until somebody else sits down and you're like, oh, I guess that isn't table conversation.
My mom was a nurse, so I was kind of used to saying things in a different way that normal kids around me didn't say those biological things with those terms.
No, there's nothing held back. Although we do have one daughter who has zero capability to listen to anything medical. So when it starts, she's like, la, 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 la. And I thought she'd outgrow it, but no, she's still that way at 27.
Well, what is she doing?
She's getting her MBA and doing the wealth management.
Okay.
Yeah.
So still problem solving.
Oh,
like
she's
medical.
She's probably our most brilliant child. She knows she could go to medical school. She's like, I know I can do it. I know I can do it. But she goes, but would I actually have to touch people if I went into medicine? Yeah, sweetheart, you would. You would have to touch patients. And she's like, okay, forget it.
Something you mentioned before, guilt.
Oh,
Mom,
absolutely.
Guilt.
Yeah.
I know I struggle with this, but something you said there was it might actually be beneficial for the kid so your oldest is, more whatever, free flowing, solving their own issues.
Independent. He's been a dad since he's been little. The mom guilt.
Why do we have
we
that?
all have it. We all have it. Even I see it with the younger moms now that I work with, and I'm like, I don't know what it is, because dads, at least my husband, doesn't have it. He could be away from the kids for 3 or 4 days, and he doesn't have it. My daughter shadowed, the one that's in medicine, shadowed a female neurosurgeon when she was trying to decide to go to medical school. And the female neurosurgeon says, don't do it. She goes, it's Friday. I haven't seen my kids since Tuesday. And she goes, I thought it was cool being a neurosurgeon, and I do love my job, but I miss my kids. But I don't know, I know my husband, I don't know what it is. Because if he didn't see our kids for 2 or 3 nights, I don't think he would carry that guilt. So, I don't know. Estrogen. Maybe if I knew that my husband was home with the kids, that'd be fine. But moms still want to be there for those moments, and dads can let them go. At least my husband. Sorry, but yeah, for whatever reason, like Greg went to one Halloween parade around the school, and those moments that as a mom, you're like, you love. With preschool, they're all dressed up, and you're just like, you just really want to be there for it. And Greg just happened to have the morning free for a cancellation or whatnot. So he came, and John cried and was on my hips, and Greg's like, glad I haven't been missing anything through the years. So he was like, this is all it is? See, I knew I wasn't. So anyway, the mom guilt.
I guess we power through. We know it will pass. I mean, we've talked about it in our family. I still carry a lot of mom guilt, but I know when I get out of the way and I step back, it's actually better for the kids. But I can remember daycare early on, JJ would always drop them off. Kids would never cry. They're happy. That was our routine. I got to pick up. So I got to open the door and see them run to me and put their hands up. And it was amazing. The few times I dropped off, they're crying.
Miserable.
I get in the car, I'm probably tearing up. And it was just so I'm sure a routine, etc. But yeah, it seems innate that men I guess they just focus on one thing and they zone in, and it's not a mix of every aspect of their being.
And that's part of every day for them. Like, you can't give them 2 chores. They've got to finish that first one first, Whereas my kids always laugh. They're like, Mom, you didn't finish your sentence. I'm like, what? I go, that conversation's over to me. I've moved on to something else. And they'd say that all the time. Oh, there she goes. She didn't finish. And I'm like, finish what? So my mind is always going 1,000 different directions. And yeah, it got to the point when Matt was a baby at daycare, and he didn't own pajamas. Like, he slept in his play clothes because we would pick him up out of bed. And thank God that kid could sleep through a storm or everything. And we would put him in the car, drive him to daycare. They had a cot set up for him. So the poor kid went to bed in his bed and woke up at daycare. And Greg could do that. And I cried every single day I dropped him off. I'm like, this is just really sad. And he was like, he's fine. He's fine. And he was. So I was like, if Greg could do the drop off, made my life a lot better.
So those are some little tips and tricks. It certainly made my life better not to do the drop off.
Right.
So maybe some of those adjustments and tips or tricks to acknowledge, okay, we face this as women, as moms, for whatever reason, and it's okay. We're still going to do the things that we need to do to fill out life. But maybe there's some tweaks we can make along the way.
I would definitely give more to Greg, even though he wouldn't acknowledge that he wanted the extra work. But I would definitely delegate more of the kids' stuff to him that I took on. All their homework. Of course, when I tried, sometimes that didn't go so well. Craig was like, why do we have to make a train for the book report? Like, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But I don't need to hear you whine too. But we have to make a train car for the book report. That's what the instructions say. So, you try to give them more, but.
But like you said earlier, and I think that's so true, we found in our family, having one parent who can have a little bit more of the flexible schedule.
That'd be huge.
During those years where the kids are young and you've got projects and book reports and activities that they can't drive themselves to legally. And you can't Uber your children, even if you want to. All those things to say, I think what we've done is said, as a partnership, as a family, we want this. Now, what's the best way for us to get there right now with what we have in front of our plate? I also feel, and maybe because John's a little bit older, he's a year older than our oldest, and maybe it's just because my kids are older and COVID and they didn't give out a lot of projects. I also feel like the schools aren't giving out as many projects like that they used to. And maybe that's a benefit because there's more families that are being stretched with 2 working households, whatever it is.
So when my oldest kids were at St. Clement, the 8th grade moms had to work their share of pizza days on Thursday. So I got assigned so many pizza days in the school year, which meant I had to take the day off of work because Thursday was a typical work day for me. So I had to take the day off of work in order to work my pizza days, and I did, and it was fine. I just worked around it and whatnot. And then as because I've got a 14-year spread, John was 14 years younger than Matt. Somewhere around child 4 or 5, they realized, hey, we could hire out people to do these pizza days and not make these moms have to take the day off of work, because there was that many more working moms between that. And now, but they still staffed the kitchen with moms, in general. And then they finally just hired a food service to staff because there was just not enough moms were home. They could work lunch. So I saw that evolution is in our kids' school. And I was like, all those days I took off just to work pizza days, so, anyway, all those things will help women just kind of balance, the family life, work life.
And it's almost training those other areas in our lives, right? So training the schools. I think before we started recording, we were laughing, and my husband laughs at this too. If there's a call from the school or the teacher or the nurse there, even though majority of people that know us know that I'm in an office, I have meetings randomly, calls from clients, etc. My husband works from home for the most part, he's with us right now, has some projects and things where he's out of the house, but he's easier to get a hold of. He actually jokes, he's like, why do you even have a phone? You don't answer it. Jokingly. So, but the school still calls me, still texts me, birthday parties, invites, they all come to me. So I just, as you were talking, the one thing I noticed that was missing from your story was they've noticed the moms no longer can do it. They notice the moms are working more.
Right.
How at some point, and maybe it's, hey, we're just hiring a service that replaces everybody. But we're still not to the point where it's, well, what about the dads? Where are the dads mentioned in this scenario and story? And none of this conversation or any conversation I have with women about this is ever meant mean-spirited or, oh, men, blah, blah, blah. I think it's just awareness. It's talking about it. It's having these conversations and, okay, here's what we faced and what's the solution? Now, how do we get there? Right. Getting above and beyond it versus looking in the past and pointing fingers. We're not going to go anywhere if we do that.
And I honestly think that like if you compare the generations, our dads, our husbands are much better than our dads were. And so I think, when I look at my own son and what he does for his son and his wife, I'm thinking that it's getting better. It's getting better. Like, if Jack's sick, Matt will take the day off if Libby's working. And I'm like, part of it's his job. He's got some flexibility, which a lot more fields have more flexibility now. Post-COVID, there's so many more working ability to work from home. So I think that's going to open up a lot better help so that it's not all on the woman. Libby is an occupational therapist, so, she can't work from home. So if Jack's sick or something, it's on Matt. And I'm like, whew, wouldn't have seen your dad do that, but his job didn't allow for it, and he did drive carpool one day a week when Matt was a freshman at DeSmet, and he liked to call himself Mr. Mom. And I'm like, I'm going to fall off the chair dying laughing if you call yourself that one more time, because you're pretty far from that, So I think demanding for the younger generation to have more flexibility, absolutely, it would help women stay in the workforce and not have the guilt. Because if your husband's home with the kids, there's much less guilt than if there's a babysitter.
Or they're at a daycare or another facility.
Right. For a little while after I had number 5, I actually went down to working one day a week. And one of my daughters was like, who's going to be here when I wake up in the morning? I'm like, oh, Lord, I'm gone one day, and you still throw the guilt at me. And she didn't mean it meanly, but I ate it up. I ate up the guilt. I'm like, sweetie, I'm only working one day right now, But, they wanted Mom. But if Dad was there, she wouldn't have thought twice about it. If I worked one day a week and Greg could accommodate his schedule. Yeah, that didn't happen for us. So hopefully maybe at the next generation, they'll be more flexible.
I do like to tell people, I feel the same way, right? They want me all the time, and they want Mom to do something. And JJ, 100%, like, I can help. I'm here. I'm sure if it was reversed and they never wanted me and they only went to him ever, I'd be sitting here going, but my kids don't come.
Then you'd have more guilt. Then you'd have more guilt that you were working because they don't like you as much as they like Dad. Yeah, and for whatever reason, I think that's the maternal gene that most females have it. There are some that don't have it, and there's plenty in medicine that don't have any doubts. I mean, just like, there's several that have 2 nannies, and I'm like, and people ask me how many nannies I have. I'm like, none. I have a babysitter when I'm at work. That's it. I don't have a nanny. But some people think that that's good and fine, and that's fine. Yeah, I'm sure their kids are gonna be fine. But for me, I needed to be there.
Yes, I think that's important too. As we've evolved as women, working whatever industry, not working, it's all okay. You figure out what works for you, what works for your family, or whatever goal that you have, and you accommodate from there, and it's okay. But it's those assumptions sometimes that I feel like get put on us as women. Yeah. Oh, well, how can you leave your kids and come to work? I've had people ask me that. Or, aren't you so upset? It's those, I think, comments or questions, while inquisitive, lean on the negative side, that can make it even more challenging.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, in general, I think there's so many working moms these days that, you don't get the guilt like you used. I used to.
We're changing kind of what normal's just shifting and changing as people power through in different ways. Some more pioneering like you did versus ever, but without others. But without you doing that, again, I think so much of it is, what are we seeing others able to do? And now all of a sudden we know we can do it too.
Oh, I see so many young female physicians now that it just makes me smile to think that they're doing it, and they're working part-time, or they're just blending the family, and and I'm like, it's just so refreshing, because it definitely wasn't there when I started. So,
and it's then training our kids, both my son and my girls, to say, and I think something you alluded to earlier, nobody can take away your certifications, your education. You can choose to pull back down the road. You can always go back into it.
Get the hardest. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And for the girls to see that, I've told my girls recently, I want you to be able to do whatever you want to do at as high of a level as you want to do it. So work hard, pay attention, soak everything in, learn, grow. But also for my son to then see our family dynamic where, mom's doing this or that, but dad's supporting in this way and she's supporting him in this way, so that he can, like your son, Matt, who's cooking or taking the day off or working from home, to be able to do that, I think we'll exponentially see this snowball.
Oh, yeah. Our kids will definitely see it. Yeah. They're little sponges.
We went over a lot of information today. If you think back to one of the best or few best things that you ever did in life, and or the mistakes you made that you wouldn't repeat, what are some that stick out to you?
Best things that I did? I always laugh. I worked really hard to get all of my prerequisites done and my engineering degree my senior year, and then went straight on to medical school. So literally I had to finish my engineering degree August 1st, and then I started medical school August 31st. And that was crazy. I mean, I took 20 hours a semester. But I always look back and I think, well, if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have been in Greg's class, and that's where we met. So that was the best thing / hardest thing, so we met and married then. So actually, going into medicine was, I think it's one of the best things. And then having my kids, and I've been very blessed.
Because it sounds like even the mistake going into engineering was actually really good for you.
Oh,
and it paid off.
Well, interestingly enough, a lot of times people are like, oh, you were an engineer before? I actually literally had somebody, oh, you were an engineer before you were a doctor? You must really be smart. I was like, well, I can do math and science. This is true. So that was definitely not a mistake, although it was a hard road to do. But I'm not sure that I would do a lot different. Yes. Having my first baby when I did was probably, I wouldn't call him a mistake. It's his actually birthday today.
Oh,
happy birthday, Matt!
Birthday, Matt.
31. how did I get to be old enough to be the mom of a 31-year-old?
Right. You don't look it. You said something about gray hairs and things. I'm like, I don't.
Oh, well, there's the appointments.
Yes. I know. Right. So maybe the story there is, when you see a roadblock or you are at a point where something's not fitting, don't just give up or quit.
Oh my
Be
gosh,
willing
I
to
could have
explore and
so
adjust.
easily quit when I had that first baby. In fact, when we told my parents that we were pregnant with Matt, my mom's face looked like I was about 15 years old and in high school. I mean, she was just so nervous that I wasn't going to finish the road that I had paved out for me, because she knew what I was like with kids. I had a brother born when I was 13, so I was his little mom, and I was adored that little guy. So she knew what I was like with kids, and she was afraid. And I put myself through undergrad and med school. I mean, and I had all kinds of loans, as all these medical students do now. And she was like, "Are you going to finish? Are you going to be able to do this?" That probably was the hardest thing, but it was a gift from God.
And the old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right. Well, and there's no perfect time to have a baby.
Right.
Absolutely zero perfect time. So, yeah, we tried all different kinds, and there was no perfect one.
So in life, we'll see you with grandkids. We'll see you at Mercy Hospital in the St. Louis area.
Yes.
Helping people.
In the surgery centers. That's the one thing I have done, is I've cut back to the surgery centers. Yeah, so it makes it lower key, lower stress.
So we'll maybe see you out and about in those areas if we have to go to a surgery center. So maybe it's kind of like the dentist or whoever. It's like, I really don't want to see you.
Right, yeah, there you go.
I guess if
see
you
on
do
different
see
terms.
Dr. JoAnn Galakatos, because there are two Dr. Galakatoses out there at least, Dr. JoAnn Galakatos, you're in good hands.
Ah, thanks.
Well, thank you for reaching out or for coming today, for sharing your story. And I think, again, just more confidence for women out there. Reach out to people, women in the field, anybody really. Ask for ideas, thoughts, help to find that right fit.
The right balance.
It sounds like now hearing your story, it's like, oh, she just had it all pinned down. So know that you won't.
Right.
It may seem like it to others on the outside.
Right.
But it's probably a lot of
Struggling,
pivoting, navigating, help, input from others, and sometimes going with the flow and seeing where it takes you.
Absolutely. Yes.
It was a pleasure to dive deeper. Had no idea you were an engineer. Knew all about the doctor side. But again, always a fun
Thanks
story.
to good old Dad.
Yeah. Yes. And congrats to you for all that you've accomplished.
Aw, thank you.
Happy birthday to your son.
Thank you.
Whatever's next in the journey
Yeah,
for all of us.
more grandchildren.
One soon. Another one
yes,
soon.
Exactly.
Thank you, JoAnn. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Cynthia.
This concludes another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. To hear more episodes of the show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about our mission of helping women reach higher levels of success, visit sheliftproject.com and sign up to receive the latest news, ebooks, videos, and more.